Hello, my name is Ellsworth Quorum. I'm a retired police detective from New York. Worked with the Port Authority PD in the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. I've been retired, and part of what I want to talk about today, and today is June the 5th, 2020, and for the last few weeks we've been dealing with the civil protests and civil unrest, and for the last 3 months, we've been dealing with the COVID. And people don't really know or haven't gotten a handle on how to deal with the police. And the police, some of them have ideas on how to deal with people, but there's an overall problem that nobody's looking at. And that problem originates and stems from the fact that every department in the country, every state, every county, every city is run independently. They're all run differently. And that's a good thing and it's a bad thing. I think it's a bad thing. There are some departments that are extremely efficient, well run, and professional. And then there's other ones that are run like the Keystone Cops. The solution, there's no one magic bullet or one solution to fixing all of the problems, but I think until we have a uniform police department for this country, in other words, every department, every officer is trained the same, is afforded the same educational opportunities for law enforcement, then there's going to be a difference. There's going to be a different way in policing, different way in getting along with the communities that they work within. There's going to be a difference in their procedures. And every time that you have a difference in procedure, there's conflict and that there's a different approach no matter what state you're in. I worked in New York and New Jersey, and the two states were almost as different as night and day when it came to enforcement. One state had penal codes, and the other state had misdemeanors and high misdemeanors. And the reality is that the training that's afforded each department is variable. Some places can afford to have everyone trained well. Other places have their officers are trained minimally, and as a consequence, if you're not trained that well to understand and know how to deal with events that happen within your jurisdiction, you're not going to know how to deal with them. You only know what you know. So right now, it's chaos because you have some officers who are really stepping up to the plate and doing the things that need to be done the right way, and you have other ones that are stepping over the line and creating situations that really shouldn't be done. We need to have, without any discrepancy, the policing done the same as in Washington State, as in Texas, as in New York, Illinois, the Carolinas, the Dakotas. It should be the same. There shouldn't be any difference. You shouldn't have officers who don't know the law, don't understand the law, and don't know how to enforce the law. It's ridiculous. So we need to have a national conversation. It's going to mean some drastic steps. When I say drastic steps, I'm talking about some departments have been around for 100 plus years. Some have been around for 30, 40 years. And they have their way of operating. They're not going to want to change. Well, this works for us. each department has someone that's in charge, and the one that's in charge is not going to like somebody telling them how to run their department. Yeah, I mean, you get the mayors in a lot of cities. In fact, most mayors in most cities are influential in the way that they run their department. They call in the police chief, and they give them their marching orders. The chief gives their subordinates their marching orders. That's not the way to run a department. That's not the way policing should be done. That's why law enforcement is so out of step with the way that it should be. If you look at the Army, the Air Force, the Marines, the Navy, look at all the military forces in our country. It doesn't matter where they're deployed, they're all trained the same. If you're trained in Annapolis and you're deployed around the world, you're going to adhere to your training. If you're trained at West Point, you'll adhere to your training. They have the same training. Whatever training they get, that's the way that they operate, uniformly. In the service, you have the UCMJ, Uniform Code of Military Justice, the rules and regulations by which they operate. It's the same. You don't have people in one part of that are stationed in one part of the country acting and operating totally independent or differently than somebody that's operating in another part of the country or another country. If you're stationed in Germany, you've got the same training that somebody that's stationed in Japan, or if they're stationed in Afghanistan, or if they're stationed in Central or South America. It's the same training. You'll know how to operate or how to act or react to any given situation because you've had the same training. Our police departments don't. Our police departments do not. You can be in Mississippi and you're going to operate differently than somebody in Texas, and they'll operate differently than somebody in Montana or Idaho or Wyoming. It's insane. It's wrong. Quite frankly, I think it's stupid. But until we have a conversation, a national conversation with police departments, and if they can get over their egos, get over their fiefdoms, get over the way they've been doing things for years, and realize that the professionalism that's been exhibited by some departments can be uniform across the country. And that's what I'm talking about. Train every police officer in this country the same. And you should have the same results. Then it's not going to be. Of course, you're going to have exceptions to the rules because you have people that fall through the cracks every day. You have people that shouldn't be cops. You have people who should have been weeded out at the beginning and unfortunately weren't. That they're not psychologically or just human, behavioral aptitude. They don't have that. What's necessary to do the job? You have people who get on the job for a variety of reasons, and it's not necessarily good. But the reality is that until you're in a position to look at that, there's always going to be conflict and chaos. You're going to have officers that are going to overreact in situations that really needed to be diffused. You're going to have officers that are in fear for their life when it's not a situation that's fearful. And I understand. You've got a split second to make decisions. And I worked in New York City. I worked in probably the busiest part of New York City, Midtown Manhattan. Worked in the bus station. You had over 250,000 people a day come through the facility every day. And you had every kind of crime that you can think of. Every kind of crime you can think of. And some of them were, a lot of them, most of them were happening simultaneously. You might have a robbery and a pickpocketing, stabbing, shooting, drunks, all that within a space of 2 minutes. You might be responding to someone falling down the stairway, and you're trying to aid and assist them. And while you're doing that, a crowd gets around you, and while the crowd's around you, you've got somebody pickpocketing and stealing the luggage of people that are surrounding in the crowd. You don't know. You get incidents where people are in accidents. I had a woman that was pinned against the column of the bus station by a cab, and the cabbie's foot slipped on the brake, and the car lurched and pinned her to a column. While she was being pinned to the column, somebody ran by and snatched her purse while she was falling to the ground. We wound up chasing him, catching him a block away, but he took advantage of the situation. Split seconds. That's the reality of working in a place like New York. But that's also a reality of working all over the country. You run into everything. You have to be trained to react to whatever happens. And when I say react, I'm talking about basically deal with, knowing how to resolve whatever the issues are. If it's a shooting, if it's a kidnapping, if it's a robbery, if it's whatever, you need to know how to work, how to do it. So until we come to a point where we realize that the guy in, police officer in Wisconsin or Illinois or Pennsylvania or wherever needs to be as trained as the cops in the major cities that can afford to have their department give extra training for situations that come up. You're going to have chaotic responses. You're going to have guys who will be pulling their weapons when they should have their weapons holstered. You're going to have continuation of the chaos that we have now. So, this is a conversation that I'm just opening up and throwing the ideas out. And hopefully we can shed a little bit of light on the subject. We'll talk about this more in depth. It's the first video. Thank you.